Chapter 11. Elmira was kind enough to fix a tray of eggs and bacon for the doctor, even though she had finished cooking and begun cleaning up. I took the meal down to him. "Thank you," was all he said, and he didn't look like he wanted to talk. A pang pierced my heart as I watched him slowly begin eating the eggs. What had happened to the energetic, witty doctor of a few days ago? "Can I get you anything?" I asked softly. Shaking his head, he focused his eyes on mine for a moment. "Just look after sickbay for me." I nodded, 2 quick nods. "I will." As he turned back to his food, something seemed to stop him. He looked back at me searchingly, but instead of looking at my face, he looked at my jacket pocket. "What's that?" "What?" I asked, forgetting. Then I reddened as I remembered the paper from Commander Howitt's. A corner of it stuck out of my jacket. I should tell the doctor about it, show him, let him figure out the mystery with me. "It's nothing," I mumbled, stuffing it back into my pocket. Without even questioning, he went back to his eggs. I swallowed, opened my mouth, and turned and fled, not waiting to make sure the door slid closed behind me. I slipped into my room, not allowing myself time to stop and think, and I pulled the paper out of my pocket. Then I stood holding it and observing my accelerated heartbeat for a moment. Closing my eyes tightly, I opened the paper, then looked at it. It was the blood test results, just as I'd thought. I skimmed over the automatic results, things I already knew. Blood type, red blood cell count, etc. It was the special searches that I was interested in. I had tried doing some research on Langham's disease on the doctor's electronic magazines, but had been unable to find anything beyond vague references. Commander Howitt's hadn't been lying when he said that little was known about it. I didn't know what the organism in Langham's disease was called, but out of the corner of my eye I saw some black, cramped handwriting at the bottom of the page and assumed he'd explained. Eagerly I read over the plasma report and noted the small cell count of angiophages. Gripping the paper, I put the word together in my mind. Angio, vessel. Phage, eating. Eating vessels. That wasn't a hard one to figure out. My gaze drifted to the bottom of the page, and I strove to make out the commander's small, inky handwriting. Presence of angiophages detected, though in small amounts. Not sure what to make of this. Will find you at lunch. Erasmus Howitz. That wasn't much of an explanation, but he did say he would speak to me at lunch. Gritting my teeth, I ripped the paper into 2 pieces, wadded them both up viciously, then hurled them into the recyclator chute next to the lavatory. Then I sighed. My wristcom beeped, and Captain Trent's voice sounded from it. "Andi, did you get him settled?" "Yes, sir. He's resting now. I was just on my way up to sickbay." "Could you do me a favor first?" "Yes, sir." "We have some guests in airlock 1, but we're in the middle of a thruster test right now, and I can't leave the bridge. Would you welcome them aboard, please?" "Certainly." "Mr. Yannendale is coming down, too. The visitors are looking for someone, and they think he might be here. No, Gilders, wait a second. Sorry, Andi. I don't want them wandering around my ship until I talk to them, so you and Yannendale take them to the briefing room on B-deck, all right?" "Yes, sir, I'll do that," I assured, already starting out the door. "Thank you. Tell them I'll meet them there in 15 minutes. Hold on, keep course." The call was cut off, and I raced down the hall and up the elevator towards airlock 1, heart beating nervously. Looking for someone. I shuddered as I remembered the warning Dr. Holmes had sent via crash. What would they want with an old country doctor? They couldn't be here for him, and if they were, then they were mistaken and thinking... Thinking what? What did they think? I pushed these thoughts away and hastened to obey the captain's request. Lieutenant Commander Yannendale was already at the airlock when I reached it, and he nodded briskly as I approached. Moving his fingers over the keypad to the left of the airlock entrance, he unsealed it and then stepped back, hands behind his back, legs apart. I stood up straight and put my hands by my sides, trying to look proper and professional as the large door slid open noisily to reveal 2 men. One of them was tall, with broad shoulders and a thick, set jaw. The other, a little behind him, was significantly shorter, hardly more than my height. He had bright eyes that seemed to be too high on his forehead, a small nose that was turned up slightly, and he stepped out of the airlock with a strange gait that made it look as though one leg was shorter than the other. They were both dressed in some kind of blue uniform with a silver insignia that I didn't recognize. Yannendale stepped forward and introduced himself. "Lieutenant Commander Yannendale, Comm Marshal of the Starship Surveyor." He glanced at me and I bowed slightly. "And I'm Andi Lloyd, Second Medical Officer. Welcome aboard, gentlemen." The tall man barely nodded and flashed a badge from inside his jacket. "Oliver Pete, Special Agent of the ILA. This is my associate, Mr. Sigmet." "Welcome," Yannendale echoed. "Captain Trent will see you in the briefing room shortly." "Won't you come this way?" I said, hoping I sounded formal and courteous enough. I wasn't used to welcoming official visitors, and I certainly wasn't used to speaking with agents of the International Legal Association. These must not be the men Crash had warned about. After I gestured in the general direction of the briefing room, Yannendale began to walk there, and I smiled at the two men before following. Pete didn't change his expression in the least, but Sigmet, as he began limping along in his strange way, did. At least his mouth did, curving up in a broad smile. His eyes didn't change at all. They both unnerved me. I turned away from them and found myself reassured by the familiarity even of the back of Yannendale's green jacket. We led them up the elevator, then a little way down the hall and into the white briefing room. Yannendale stood aside to let them in the door, then gestured to seats at the long white table. Yannendale stood aside to let them in the door, then gestured to the seats at the long white table. Without waiting for further invitation, they both selected seats about halfway down the room and sat. They didn't speak to us, but sat patiently, staring ahead. I found myself feeling more awkward, and a sidelong glance at Yannendale showed me that he wasn't entirely comfortable himself. He cleared his throat. "The captain should be here soon." Pete nodded, and Sigmet smiled with his mouth only again, but neither of them said anything. After another silent moment had passed, I spoke up, my voice sounding small and immature. "Can I get you gentlemen anything?" "An interview with Captain Trent," said Pete calmly. I blushed. Could I get you a drink or something?" "No, thank you." Even if I'd wanted to speak again, I couldn't think of anything else to say. So we stayed as we were, the two agents sitting silently, Yannendale and I standing on either side of the open door, waiting. It seemed like hours before the captain finally walked through the door, standing straight and tall, his tanned face serious and captain-like, with his green cap perched staunchly on top of his head. The two guests stood up when he entered. "I'm Captain Harrison Trent," he said, advancing to shake hands with the two men. "Oliver Pete, Special Agent of the ILA," said Pete, with exactly the same intonations he'd used when introducing himself to us. "This is my assistant, Mr. Sigmet." The captain furrowed his brows. "What is the trouble?" Mr. Sigmet spoke up quickly, as if to reassure him. "It has nothing to do with you or your ship, Captain." Rather than responding, the captain turned around. "Yannendale, you may return to your station." The comm marshal nodded and left. I was about to turn and leave, but the captain's voice stopped me. "Wait, Andi, my comm is out of batteries. Would you go replace them and ask Gilders to report here as soon as he can? And bring it back when you're done." As he spoke, he unstrapped his wrist comm and held it out to me. "Yes, sir." Taking it, I hurried on my way to the hold where extra supplies of all kinds were kept. On the way, I gave Gilders the captain's message via my wrist comm, and when I reached the hold, I hurriedly replaced the batteries in the comm. Then I rushed back up the elevator to B deck and to the briefing room. Gilders wasn't there yet, but the captain was deep in conversation with the two agents when I entered. "I don't care if you have a warrant. He's under my authority and my protection, and I'll have to verify your story before I can allow you to make an arrest." "But you have no way of verifying it," Sigmet protested. "You're not in range of the comm towers." "We will be in 4 more sectors, and you will just have to wait until then." Pete stood and drew himself up to his full height, eyes indignant. "But Trent, Erasmus Howitz is a dangerous criminal.